Let's have some fun today, fellas. Let's look way ahead and talk about our prediction of the top 25 picks in 2025 fantasy football drafts. Let me reiterate, we are predicting what the order will be, not what we think the order should be. So we'll have discussions around 27 different players. We'll give you our thoughts on all three of our picks at each position in the top 25. We have so many players to cover here, fellas. So let's just dive on into it. Pick one in the 2025 fantasy football drafts. I have Saquon Barkley. Tyler, you have Saquon Barkley. Cameron, you have Jahmyr Chase. So let's start there. I think it's very clearly these two are in the conversation for the 101 next year. I'll start with you, Cameron, since you have a different pick than Ty and I. Why is Jahmyr Chase your first overall pick next year?
He was the highest scoring non-quarterback this year, 23.7 fantasy points per game. He has Joe Burrow, who honestly, if the Bengals would have won maybe 3 or 4 more games this year, could have won the MVP. He's averaged 19.2 fantasy points for his career. And I think last year we saw the shift really come into play of people aren't afraid to take wide receivers at the 2, the 3. I mean, some people were taking them as their one-on-one. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. And just with how good he's been and the fact that T. Higgins is probably going to leave, I think just continues to bump Jahmyr Chase up the board.
Interesting. So you think T. Higgins leaves. I think he stays on the second year of the franchise tag. I think the Bengals are just forced to pay up and eventually offer him a contract. Are you think T. Higgins is around, leaves, Ty?
I think he leaves, but
Okay.
I also see a very real possibility of him staying just because Jahmyr Chase is more than likely going to be holding out for a contract this offseason. And the Bengals would be wise to try to keep T. Higgins around in case Jahmyr Chase does miss half the year because he's not getting the contract he wants.
So why is Saquon Barkley then your first overall pick, Ty? Because you've expressed, I don't want to say a little bit of concern around Jahmyr Chase. I mean, we'll get to him in a second again, but you have Saquon Barkley 101. Why is that?
There is a positional advantage with his ceiling at the running back position, right? We got a 46-point game and we got 2 32, 33-point games during the season as well. You could look at things as if it was a little inconsistent because he went like 33 and then 17 and then 33 and 13. The floor is super high with Saquon Barkley in this Philly offense with the offensive line that they have. I know that we are not going to get another 350 rushing attempts, another 2,000 rushing yards. So we could see a bit of regression, but I think a lot of people, whether it be recency bias from the playoffs or any other reason, I think most people will say that Saquon should be the 101.
It's Saquon Barkley or Jahmyr Chase for me. Again, I have Saquon there, and it matches the theme of how I look at what I think the 2025 draft will look like. Is that I think the running back craze returns next year, and so I think that gives Saquon the edge over Saquon Barkley, or Saquon the edge over Saquon the edge over Jahmyr Chase in my book. But when we look at pick 2, it's Jahmyr Chase for me. It's Jahmyr Chase for you, Ty. But Cameron, you got Bijan Robinson here ahead of Saquon Barkley, might I add. Your first two are Jahmyr Chase and Bijan Robinson. So what's your reason for having Bijan ahead of Saquon?
Yeah, actually, I think it's a 2-man race between Bijan and Jahmyr Chase for the number 1 overall pick. And that's because I think people are still super ageist. I think after what Christian McCaffrey did this year at 27 years old, coming in, but because we've talked so much, everybody in fantasy football has talked so much about this 28-year age cliff of running backs fall apart then. Nobody can, and obviously, Derrick Henry is helping dispel that a little bit. Alvin Kamara is helping dispel that a little bit. But people are still going to be concerned about that because Saquon's had injuries in the past. We just had that with Christian McCaffrey. Bijan's 5 years younger than him. I also think the PPR upside of Bijan, people are going to kind of attach to because like you said, Ty, we're not going to expect 350 carries for Saquon. And if we do see that, we're not going to expect the efficiency to maintain 2 years in a row on 350 carries. Where, Bijan had 30 more receptions, 200 more receiving yards. I think people are going to attach to that a little bit more. And actually from week 6 on, Bijan outscored Saquon Barkley in points per game, 22.8 to 21.4. So I think it's stuff like that's just going to continue to come up where people are going to go, hey, Bijan over the later half of the year was really, really good too. Yeah. Just as good. And he's 5 years younger. That's why I think he's going to end up getting the edge over Saquon.
Ty, you got any thoughts on that? You kind of nodded your head a little bit as Cameron was making that second half of the season point there. That moved the scales at all for you?
Maybe. I mean, I don't want to spoil the next pick, but I think a lot of the success that Bijan had towards the later half of the year was because they didn't have good quarterback play, so they had to rely on Bijan. If Michael Penix comes out at the beginning of next year, and I don't want to say that Kirk wasn't a competent quarterback, but if he was, just a little bit better than Kirk Cousins, I don't know if Bijan Robinson is going to be averaging like 22 carries a game and finding the end zone twice.
I mean, is there a better way to make it easier of a transition for Michael Penix, though, than to establish the run and not force the ball into his hands and force him to, be a full-time pocket passer? And that's where his strength is, obviously. But, when they brought Kirk Cousins in, it's like, oh, we can sling the ball around the yard now with Kirk Cousins. Just not the same. So what better reason or what better way to take pressure off of Michael Penix than to give Bijan Robinson the football, which, Cameron, I think you do bring up valid points. That's why I have Bijan Robinson as my third pick. This is where you have Saquon, and Ty, you have Bijan Robinson here at your third pick as well. So it's a consensus top three for us. I don't hate if you just have them in any order. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't hate it if someone takes Bijan 101 next year. I still prefer Saquon. I think based on what he's doing this postseason, people are going to look at that and say, this dude is literally insane. Like he is a freak of nature. I'm just going to take him 101 and worry about it later. But you could, I think you probably admittedly could have these three guys in any order that you wanted to. Let's move on to picks 4 and 5, because we don't want to rehash too many players on this episode. Picks 4 and 5, we all have the same two players. It is Justin Jefferson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Cameron, you and I have Justin Jefferson as our pick 4. Ty, you have Gibbs as your pick 4. Ty, why do you have Gibbs ahead of Justin Jefferson?
Just because I think recency bias is going to be the biggest factor for Jahmyr Gibbs the last 4 weeks of the season, averaging over 25 points a game and then getting 40 in week 18, right? Then you see what in a very short stint for Detroit in the playoffs, but Jahmyr Gibbs, I have to believe going into year 3, they are going to want to get Jahmyr Gibbs the ball even more in the backfield. David Montgomery is still a piece, and that will give people some kind of hesitancy, but even when Monty was healthy last year, Gibbs was the running back 6 in points per game. So it's not even that like Monty is taking too much away from Gibbs. Like these guys can both feast. Now that Ben Johnson is out in Detroit, that does also, that may give some people some hesitancy as well. But I think with me projecting Gibbs, I think it's recency bias and it's the talent of Jahmyr Gibbs continuing to win out.
So Cam, why is Justin Jefferson ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs for you then?
For me, it is that Ben Johnson piece. I think people are just going to be nervous enough about this Lions offense that they're going to go, Jefferson's been so consistent. There's no reason to bet against him. It has not mattered. The quarterback, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, dude still produces. He's got Kevin O'Connell locked in. We've seen what Kevin O'Connell can do, right? People are going to have high expectations for JJ McCarthy coming into next year. And I will say, like Ty said, he could just continue to be more involved in this offense without Ben Johnson, right? The new offensive coordinator could just come in and say, you know what, this isn't a 50-50 split. This is now a 60-40, a 65-35 kind of split. And Gibbs could be, the steal of the draft to pick 5, right? That is definitely within the range of outcomes. But I just think as a consensus, I think the Ben Johnson news is going to be enough that people are going to be like, when they're deciding, 4 and 5, nitpicking that much, it's going to be enough to drop him that one pick.
Right, and that's where I'm at too. You can have these two in either order. I don't care what order you have them in. You could say, well, Justin Jefferson with JJ McCarthy, unproven. I get it. I would then say we did the same thing with Sam Darnold this year, and look how that panned out. And yeah, without Ben Johnson, there's reasons to say I'm slightly more pessimistic on Jahmyr Gibbs. But are you really pessimistic enough to push him outside of your top 5? I would say no. So again, that is our consensus. Flip them around for pick 5. Before we go any further, though, want to remind the people over on YouTube that we are with you all off season long. So if you love fantasy football, if you're playing dynasty fantasy football, if you're sickos like us and trying to project 2025 already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell as well, so you know when all of our newest episodes are up. Promise you will thoroughly enjoy our channel, because all we do here is talk NFL fantasy football content. We'll be talking NFL draft content. We'll be talking dynasty content. And we'll have all sorts of off-season fantasy football content over the summer as well for you. So subscribe, make sure you tune in so you don't miss a single video. Let's move on to pick 6 here, fellas. This is where this is the wide receiver one that we're projecting in the first round, because the next, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 picks are all the same 4 wide receivers in some order. So it's going to be interesting to see how we nitpick this apart here. Ty, you and I have Amon-Ra St. Brown at pick 6. Cam, you have Puka Nacua. Well, you and I will come back to Puka Nacua in a second, because I think we might have a little bit of conflicting opinions on him around how the public may view him going into 2025. The thing we can count on with Amon-Ra St. Brown, though, is that what you are getting year in and year out at this point is a top 5 fantasy football wide receiver. He is the clear number 1 wide receiver in Detroit. He is, can you say, the most reliable wide receiver in fantasy football? Is that, would you say he's the most reliable? Yes, no?
I'm giving it to Jefferson still.
Sure. Sure.
And I'm worried a little bit about about Ben Johnson being gone. Sure. That's my hesitation. That's why he's not up here. But he's got to be in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, I would say it's still the top 2, right? Chase and Jefferson, but then Amon-Ra is right there and probably can be in that conversation.
I mean, if you want to pick that's not going to lose you your fantasy football league, it is Amon-Ra St. Brown, which I think it just goes so far within a community that is, sometimes scared of making the wrong pick in the first round. So for some people, it's just like, nope, give me Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that people just start to value that, especially when you look at some of the next guys on our list. Let's move on to pick 7. Again, we'll come back to Puka Nacua. Pick 7. Cameron, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown here. Ty, you and I actually both have CeeDee Lamb here. Now, I know when we talked about our wide receiver rankings, you and I were, can I say, a little bit more critical? Maybe not a little bit more critical, but maybe had a little bit more of a pessimistic takeaway on his 2024 season, despite losing Dak Prescott halfway through. How confident are you that people still view CeeDee Lamb as like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver? Because that's where we have him ranked. He's wide receiver 4 in our rankings here. How confident are you that people still view him that way?
I have to think that people have to think of him as a top 5 wide receiver, because when you look at the state of this Dallas offense, there is no one besides CeeDee Lamb, right? So by just process of elimination, right, you can just say that CeeDee Lamb is just going to get peppered with targets year in and year out, right? And now we have the coaching question. If they bring in a Kellen Moore, if they promote Brian Schottenheimer, which I don't understand, but if they do,
some weird rumors about that too. There's some weird rumors.
It is a little too loud for my liking, but I digress. CeeDee Lamb is the offense there until they get a run game, until they bring in. I don't want Brandon Cooks is a nice number 2, but when they bring in a guy that is not on the wrong side of 29, I like CeeDee Lamb has to be considered as a top 5 wide receiver.
If Dak Prescott is under center, I think you can still view CeeDee Lamb in that light, no questions asked. Cameron, you are a little bit lower on CeeDee Lamb. You have him, not to spoil it, down at pick 9, but again, we have a different player in mind for who we're going to talk about at pick 9. What's your main reason for maybe not pessimism, but the public's perception around CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, because personally, I think he should be probably pick 6 is where I would have CeeDee Lamb personally. I think recency bias. I think people are so down on Dak, which from a fantasy perspective makes no sense. And I think whoever they bring in as a coach is going to scare people off. Which I think even if you bring in Kellen Moore, which Kellen Moore proved, I know how to use CeeDee Lamb. I think it's still going to make people go, I don't like it. It's gross. The Cowboys are a dumpster fire. I don't want anything. Like I just think it's enough where he felt like he disappointed this year, even though he didn't. He just didn't have Dak for half the season.
Right.
So I just think people are going to just be so down on the Cowboys that that's why I still personally think he's worth that 6th pick.
Which this is what's fun about this episode too, is that we are projecting public opinion and we make content for the public. So if you're like, I actually don't think that's representative of the public's opinion, like let us know down in the comments. Like say like, I don't know what you all are talking about. You're misreading the room whatsoever. Yep. And obviously, again, one person's opinion is not the entire public's opinion, but it'll be fun to hear how you all view some of these players as well going into 2025. Again, as we're just doing this as mostly a fun exercise to look ahead as we're in the thick of the off season here. Let's move on to pick 8. 2 of us are in alignment here. It's Nico Collins. Cameron, you and I are in alignment at 8. Tyler, you have Puka Nacua here, which I know we just got done talking about CeeDee Lamb, Cameron, but is it primarily just people think he's going to be that, or people are going to be that out on the Cowboys that you have Nico Collins ahead of him? Or is there also kind of this combination of like, you know what, people also just really love Nico Collins?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect way to put it. It's the combination. Weeks 1 through 5, Nico 3 fantasy points per game, only behind Ja'Marr Chase. He looked phenomenal. CJ Stroud's still there. I know people were a little more down on CJ Stroud, but I think he's young enough where everyone's like, oh, he's going to bounce back. He'll be fine. And we just saw the upside of Nico Collins. So people are like, next year, fully healthy, it's going to be ready to go. Whereas CeeDee Lamb, they're like, it was kind of gross this season, even though it really wasn't when you consider everything going on with the Dallas Cowboys.
And I remember when we did our fantasy redo video midseason, the fantasy draft redo video midseason, people were calling for Nico Collins to be higher, even though he had missed a stretch of games at that point. And I'm like, I don't know how you can draft a dude in the top 20 picks that is going to miss 5 games. I mean, that, again, people are wild about Nico Collins. Tyler, I'm going to move on to pick 9 because this is where we're going to talk about Puka Nacua. I'm going to want you to kind of be maybe the level ground between Cameron and I, because my concern around Puka Nacua is that people are just going to be butthurt by this year. And they say, Puka can't stay healthy. This is like, how people said Keenan Allen was injury prone for the longest time. Mm-hmm. And then he went on a phenomenal stretch where he just never got injured or only missed, I can't remember how many games it was over the stretch of 5-6 seasons. Yeah. I feel like that Puka Nacua is just going to get, bad taste in my mouth from last year, man. Sorry, I'm pushing you down the board. That's all this is. Because Puka Nacua, Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game this last year. I mean, nothing short of phenomenal. If it's up to me, I'm totally fine betting on Puka again because he is the Rams passing attack ahead of Cooper Kupp right now. And we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I mean, there talks of Cooper Kupp being a cap casualty this offseason, clearing up some cap space. What's the boiling point for you there? Because you have him all the way up at pick 6, but I'm all the way down at pick 9.
I do gotta say, you really want to grind my gears. You bring up the Keenan Allen is injury. that is the one from day one we started this podcast. That has been the one that is.
That's 4 years of an open wound.
I can just feel my blood boiling already, and you were even on my side. But for me, I do want to point this out with Puka at 6. Fully reliant on Stafford being back next year.
Yes,
if Stafford is not back unless it's like a sign and trade for Sam Darnold or something. It's not. It's a little different. Yeah. Okay. The biggest upgrade you could have from Kevin O'Connell is going to Sean McVay himself.
Yeah, right.
So I think Sam Darnold will still be pretty good there. But yeah, he's the wide receiver 2 from week 10 on, 22.3 fantasy points per game. He after he came back from injury, he only had 1 game under 17 fantasy points where he wasn't ejected, because he did have 2, but this first one was because he threw a punch. And I'm not planning on that happening next season. And I think
under half a fight for Puka next year.
Exactly. But I think, like you said, Cooper Kupp being gone, or even if he's not, at this point where he has been so just unused, like they don't even look his way anymore. I think that was what was holding people back, even from only having Puka at pick 7 this season. That's why I think he climbs up again going to next year, where it's like, yeah, Cooper Kupp's not a factor. He is this offense. It's him and Kyra, and I shouldn't say he is. Him and Kyra Williams are this offense. I think he could see a crazy amount of targets. I think that's the way the public's going to view him as well.
So, Ty, I'll let you chime in here. It seems like you might be the leveling point here, because you have Nico Collins here at 9. You do have Puka Nacua not ranked. You have the public perceiving Puka to be ahead of Nico Collins next year. So go ahead, kind of level out the ground between Cameron and I here, because I'm just pessimistic. I just think people are just going to hold on to the injuries from this last year and say, well, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. So level the ground here between Cameron and I.
I think pick 8 is exactly where he's going to be. So I'm right and you guys are wrong.
Perfect. We can move on.
Because I see it both ways. I see your guys' arguments, and I could see it happening both of those ways, right? Cam, like you said, if Cooper Kupp is not on the Rams anymore, but the second half of the year, Puka Nacua, from week 11 on, the dude was a wide receiver 2 in points per game, right? So people could remember Puka as he is now going to be the guy in the Rams offense. But I also see it from your perspective, Lucas, of like, when we have suffered, I shouldn't say suffered, but in 2 back-to-back years, this Rams offense, for whatever reason, is pushed down draft boards because of Matthew Stafford. If that's that's the only reason I can think of, right? So again, my reasoning for I shouldn't say my reasoning, but me having him at pick 8, I'm siding more with pick 9 than I am with pick 6, but I see both ways happening. Yeah. And I think at this point, if I had to say, I think people are going to depreciate the Rams offense just because they don't have that exciting of a quarterback, even though Puka Nacua, like I said, kind of destroyed that argument second half of the year.
I know people love it when we disagree, but I will tip my cap and say, Cameron, I think that is a great point you make of if Cooper Kupp does skip town, we're looking at Puka Nacua as a top 5 pick, probably, like potentially
easily
ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs or Justin Jefferson. Like
I would say ahead of Jefferson.
Okay, yeah, and Ty would even go that far. So I do think that's like a very valid point. Of like, if that does happen, I think the public opinion absolutely skyrockets on Puka Nacua. So I think that's a valid point to consider as well. Let's keep it moving with pick 10 though, because we got, another like 16 picks to talk about here. Ty, you and I both have Derrick Henry here. Cam, you have Malik Neighbors cracking the first round. And this is where I'm going to want both sides of the coin here, because I'm going to spoil it. Cameron, you don't have Derrick Henry in the next handful of picks here, which I'm going to be very curious to hear your side. Ty, what's the primary reason that you think people are going to push Derrick Henry to be a top 10 pick next year? Because the dude's aging. There's so much tread on the tires. The Ravens say, we don't want to bring Derrick Henry in to just force feed him 20 plus touches a game. And then what did they do? They go out and they just feed him the football, right? So what's the primary reason you still see him, not you see him, but you think the public sees him as a top 10 pick next year? And spoiler, I'm going to probably agree with you on this.
Because I think he kind of silenced he's an old running back, and that the reason why he was going so late was because the Lamar Jackson problem was, or I shouldn't say problem, but Lamar Jackson being in the offense played a part in it. But people were like, going to a new team at 30 years old with the amount of work that he has, we're probably going to see some regression, and we did not. I think people are going to look at this year and say, you know what, the age isn't that big of a factor when you are in the number 1 rushing offense, the number 3 scoring offense in the league. They're going to look at Derrick Henry and just say, you know what, this guy's going to put up a ton of yards, put up touchdowns like no tomorrow. They're going to take a chance on that versus I hope they do, I should say, instead of guys that do have some question marks that maybe have a higher ceiling week to week, but have a much lower floor compared to Derrick Henry.
I will say, I do think how the Ravens offensive line shakes out this offseason will play a factor into the Derrick Henry narrative. You do have Ronnie Stanley, who is going to be a free agent this offseason. Yeah, I like Cameron. I think you mentioned it with Saquon Barkley earlier. The public is a bunch of ages. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to guess that's your primary reason for pushing Derrick Henry down. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what, maybe people do push Derrick Henry to pick 12. Yet at the same time, I'm holding out some hope for people that like, it feels like the last of the Derrick Henry, he's too old, there's too much of a workload. Like that gets silenced more and more and more by the year. Yet at the same time, I say that and I'm like, this could be it for Derrick Henry. He could sink you at pick 10 next year. Like I'm not putting that out of the question, depending on how their offensive line sorts itself out this offseason. But to loop back to my question, age, is that going to be the biggest thing you think people just hold against him?
100%. I think that's all it is I think people are risk averse when it comes to age. I think sometimes injury they'll be like, you know what, like Christian McCaffrey. It's like, we'll continue to risk it. But once a guy starts hitting age, I think that's really where you start. This could be it, because the bottom could just fall out. And I think that's what it comes down to, is people are just going to be so nervous about it. And I think even like you said, I have a couple pick 16s where I got him. I think even there, people are still going to go, God, can I really trust him? And the people who pick him, I think are going to be pretty happy next year. But I do think he's going to feel like a real value to some, and to others, they're going to be like, I'm not touching it. I'm not even going to try.
Derrick Henry will be such an interesting case study this offseason on how people view him. Again, this will be a fascinating one where if you got some pretty strong thoughts on where you think you'll be picking Derrick Henry next year, go ahead, let us know down in the comments below. Pick 11, I have Malik Neighbors here. Cameron, you have your boy, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ty, you have Josh Jacobs here. So Ty and I have already spent plenty of time talking about Brian Thomas Jr. You also have everything has been happening with the Jacksonville Jaguars today. We're recording this 5:30 Central on Wednesday, January 22nd, where literally like within the last 4 hours, last 6 hours, Liam Cohen has pulled out of the Jaguars head coaching carousel. Trent Baalke has been fired like 2 hours later after this report. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in Jacksonville? There is still so much turmoil there right now, yet you still got Brian Thomas Jr. As a top 12 first-round pick next year. The people are crazy about Brian Thomas, man. They're like you and me. I mean, I have Brian Thomas a little bit lower than you, but like the cheer ranking is like you're clearly like at the top of the fellas. I'm like not too far behind you, and then there's Ty, who's like a few steps down.
The real doesn't even think he's a top 48 pick.
No, so go ahead. Plead your case on Brian Thomas Jr. because the people have heard enough from Ty and I about our skepticism about what we want to see in order for Brian Thomas to make this massive leap. But where do you sit on Brian Thomas Jr. as the one who is most bullish on him?
So as you saw, I had Neighbors last pick too. I think what Puka and Nico did last year helps these guys so much because this was Puka and Nico last year. The guys that are kind of unproven, had 1 year, Puka the rookie, Nico the second year. Can they do it again? The fact that both of them delivered when healthy, I think has people excited about these two rookies. Brian Thomas Jr. is the wide receiver 4. So I don't think people are going to go, hey, going into his second year after Jacksonville was terrible. Like I understand it, it's kind of a mess right there right now. They were an awful offense, and Mac Jones played 7 games, right? So it's not going to get that much worse if it does get worse. And so I just don't see people going, wide receiver 4 is a rookie. Let's take him as the wide receiver 10. I think he's still going to be like a top 7 wide receiver, similar to kind of how Puka felt last year.
Sure.
It's just instead of, Puka and Matthew Stafford, but then he also had Cooper Kupp. Well, Brian Thomas has got, Trevor Lawrence and kind of an average offense, but he doesn't have that target competition. So I think there's, they both had those negatives. That's what I think keeps Brian Thomas this high. And I think people are going to be hot and heavy for these young wide receivers.
I mean, we see it every year. They get hot and heavy over the next big star-studded wide. I mean, we did it with Garrett Wilson. We've been doing it with Chris a lot. We've been doing it with Drake London. I mean, and Brian Thomas has the production to go with it to be absolutely crazy about him. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's crazy that people. I mean, this is where Garrett Wilson was being taken this year, and look what happened. And not to say that didn't pan out, but like. I don't know. So Ty.
There was extenuating circumstances. He was fine until Devontae Adams got there.
Touche. We'll have an interesting Garrett Wilson talk later. He's down the board a little bit. Another player we'll talk about. Ty, Josh Jacobs was a guy I considered skipping over here because it's like, he was good second half of the season, and he like touchdowns, the rushing production, like everything you want out of an elite running back was there. But then I forced myself to ask the question. Could Josh Jacobs actually be taken higher next year? Could he be taken ahead of Puka Nacua, ahead of Nico Collins, like a CeeDee Lamb? Like I'm not trying to get crazy. I'm not trying to get controversial to any extent, but this dude was phenomenal over the back half of the season. So is there a world where Josh Jacobs is actually, potentially taken higher?
Unfortunately, no, because I personally think he should. Because I think all three of us see that this Green Bay offense, for as disappointing as they were this year, they were still really good on offense. Okay, really good on offense. So I think we would all expect that to continue. So to your question again, I personally would say like Josh Jacobs should go higher than this, but it feels like the name value of Josh Jacobs plus people. Again, feeling disappointed about Green Bay are not going to push Josh Jacobs this high to where I have him at, but this is going to be my hope that like we can swing the pendulum because this Josh Jacobs deserves to go this high.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs over the back half of the season after their bye week from week 11 on, running back 3 overall, 12 rushing touchdowns, 143 rush attempts. I mean, he's going to be the guy in Green Bay. Matt LaFleur made that very clear this year. So I think there's a world where, like, you and I have Derrick Henry still ahead of him, Ty, but yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if the public flips that opinion on its head and says, no, yeah, give me the younger guy who did outperform Derrick Henry over the back half of the season. And I will take Josh Jacobs ahead of Derrick Henry. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Now, fellas, pick 12 is where it gets. We're starting to get a little bit crazy here. I'm going to hang the people on that, though, and we'll take a quick break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have projected how we all think the first 11 picks will go in 2025 fantasy football drafts. And I mentioned before the break, this is where things get a little zany potentially. At pick 12, I have Josh Jacobs here, so not too far behind you, Ty. Ty, you have Devon Achane, but we'll come back to him in a moment because, Cam, you have Brock Bowers here. You are projecting Brock Bowers to potentially be a top 12. Let me rephrase. You are projecting the public to make Brock Bowers a top 12 pick next year. So you think people are going to go this crazy over Brock Bowers next year?
Yeah, because I think Sam Laporta, right? We pushed him up the boards. He was a second round pick. Laporta had 10 touchdowns. Laporta averaged 1.5 points less than Bowers. Laporta was in a perfect offense. What Bowers showed is it does not matter who's calling my plays. It does not matter who my quarterback is. It does not matter what's going on. I am going to be consistent. I can do it without touchdowns. He put up 15.5 fantasy points per game and only had 5 touchdowns on the season. So, I mean, with Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Jimmy Garoppolo throwing in passes. So the situation can't get worse. So any improvement, I think people go, oh, holy cow. Like Jameis Winston comes in and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, he was going to be the best player in fantasy.
That'd be fun though. That'd be so fun.
But it's, you don't even need like a great football name. Like it's just any guy that's breathing is going to be better than Aiden O'Connell was this season. So I think that's really what it comes down to is people have seen that. We saw Travis Kelce a couple of years ago as a pick 6 overall. Obviously he still averaged 3 points per game more. He had done it for so long. He had Patrick Mahomes. But I think just the fact that he did this well as a rookie on such a bad team without being reliant on touchdowns, just the amount of records he broke, 112 receptions. I'm pretty sure is the rookie record, not just tight end record, the rookie record, 153 targets, tight end rookie record, 1,194 yards, the rookie tight end record. So I think it was all of that coming into play that people are going to be like, this guy's a generational fantasy prospect. We're pushing him up to 12. 12's a little rich for me. I don't think I'll be taking a ton of him there. I like Trey McBride, which I think you'll get in the beginning of the third, end of the second. But I think Brock Bowers is where people are going to go, ooh, this is the guy that we're really pushing up boards.
I need Vegas Jameis so bad this off. Famous Vegas Jameis. Oh, I need that so bad this off.
Inject it into my veins.
Make it, Tom Brady, make it happen, please. Father Brady, make it happen for me. Realistically, where would you take Brock Bowers? Let's put the ball in the discussion there. Where would you take him? Because I don't disagree. I think people could just get hot and bothered by Brock Bowers. We've seen people push Kelce into the top 5 picks before. So I don't think this is like an otherworldly opinion. That's like, where are you coming from on that?
Yeah.
Where would you take Brock Bowers realistically?
I think he's a middle of the first kind of guy.
Second.
Middle of the second. You're right now.
All right.
For the ship, I was lying. I think he should be higher. No, I think he's a middle of the second. I think there's, I think it's a big enough tier in the second that it just kind of depends how you're building your team. So yeah, I would say, pick 16 through 19 is kind of where I'd feel comfortable taking them.
I'm like somewhere between 16 to 20. I think would be my comfort zone. Ty, where your comfort level, and then I'll come back to you for Achane.
It's not great. Because I think I see where Cam's coming from, and that people are going to think that Brock Bowers gives them a positional advantage when he really didn't. I mean, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride,
yeah,
they were all great. They averaged 15 points a game, so you're not really getting a positional advantage. But I think a lot of people will be like, well, they're gonna kind of the leap, but then they might also kind of drink the Kool-Aid of a CeeDee Lamb, almost, of just like, there's no one else. They have to give the ball to somebody, and so they're gonna just automatically assume it's gonna be Brock Bowers. But we need to see who the head coach will be. That's the other very big component of this. Again, there's not much talent outside of Brock Bowers, but they need to.
It don't matter. It don't matter if famous Vegas Jameis is throwing him the football. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It kind of does. It kind of does, but I get your point.
I want that so bad. Okay, Ty, let's come back to you for Devon Achane, because Tua Tagovailoa, when he was on the field this year, Devon Achane was fine. They used him so much in the receiving game. We talked a little bit about the schematics of the Miami Dolphins offense after Tua Tagovailoa came back from his concussion, and Devon Achane was being used in the screen game plenty already, but that just continued to skyrocket once Tua came back from his concussion. Are you think people are willing to overlook those concerns of if Tua can't stay on the football field, I have a dead weight of an asset on my roster?
My logic for this is that, like, we didn't care so much about that with Tyreek this past year. And yes, Tyreek didn't really come through like at all to what a top 3 pick should have been.
I feel like it wasn't a concern before this year, though.
Maybe depending on the corners of the internet that you were looking at, but there were plenty of people that at least expressed some concern. I think if people are going to be scared off by a Tua injury for Devon Achane and they don't take him this high, fine. Sure. Fine. If anything, I'm just going to scoop up even more Devon Achane, because when Tua was healthy, do we know how good Achane was? Do you guys know?
He was ridiculous.
He was the running back 2 overall when Tua was healthy.
Mm.
So I hope that people can look past the injury. It's a fair question to ask.
Yeah.
I think some people, he's going to be a polarizing one, I think, where people are going to be like, I don't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole because of Tua. And some people are going to be like, you know what? If Tua misses 4 games again, it's going to stink. But I know what good can come with Tua then.
Yeah, he is certainly not going to be everybody's cup of tea this offseason. And I think he's going to be one where you're going to fall on one side of the fence or the other. There's not going to be a lot of people kind of riding the middle of, well, this could happen. I could also see this happening. It's going to be, I want the explosiveness. I want the 40-point upside of Achane, or I can't trust Tua and I might have a dead asset for 4 or 5 weeks or more. Because if Tua picks up another concussion, it could be even more. All right, we have a lot more picks to cover. Not enough time to do it. Let's move on to pick 13. This is where I have Brian Thomas Jr. Cameron, you have Devon Achane here, so you're not too far behind Ty. Ty, you made this gesture. Swing it back. What, hold on. So before we even get into your pick, you're going to add something on to Devon Achane there?
Oh, well, I'm just recklessly speculating here. I think Mike McDaniel knows that they cannot go with Snoop Huntley and Skylar Thompson as the backup QB. So what if you bring in a Jameis Winston to be the backup quarterback?
Jameis Winston in Miami. Oh, we're having a great time then.
Hello.
I mean, that'd be pretty fun too. Like Cameron's like, I don't know. That'd be fun, but I want Jameis in Vegas, man. Oh, it's PR. It's PR gold. But Ty, you have Malik Neighbors here. So for context, Cameron and I both have Malik Neighbors as top 12 picks, but notably, you have you have the public placing Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane ahead of Malik Neighbors. Is this just simply the running back craze hitting the people, and then they're just the quarterback play is less of a confidence booster than the running back craze? Is that just the priority here?
Yeah, I did put a lot of weight into the running back craze because I also see the path where the Giants take a Shedeur Sanders and people are going to be like,
totally.
Oh, total Malik Neighbors now an automatic top 10 guy. I maybe have waited, maybe put a little. Jeez, Louise.
Back on his
generational talent. He's going to the Titans.
Oh boy,
we saw that report today.
We need to move on.
You will not miss out on a generational talent at the first overall pick.
Oh, Cam Ward. Whew.
That got time to shut up pretty quickly. Malik Neighbors dies. Is it so? It's just the running back craze for you. Let's say, what if the Giants don't take a quarterback? They roll out.
So, but let's do a little mental exercise, okay? Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, right, GM and head coach, are on the hottest of the hot seats in the league, right?
Yeah.
Not only did you mess up this year, but you let Saquon Barkley walk, right? So you need this year to go well. Are you really going to hitch your wagon then to a rookie quarterback?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have a Russell Wilson, when you have a Justin Fields, when you have a Sam Darnold out there in free agency, go sign one of those guys to a 2-year deal. Sure, then it raises Malik Neighbors' stock just a little bit, but I don't know a world where what quarterback comes in like shoots Malik Neighbors up draft boards.
Which, yeah, the one you could maybe say is a Sam Darnold, but you gotta hope he makes lightning strike twice, not with Kevin O'Connell. And I don't know how many people are gonna place a bet on that. We'll keep it moving. We're on to pick 14 here. This is where I have Devon Achane. This is where Cameron has Josh Jacobs and Tyler. Tyreek Hill. I don't quite understand this one, and maybe it's because I think again, this is me. The public, similar to Puka Nacua, the public has just been burned by this Miami Dolphins offense. It's a Tua Tagovailoa thing now, and even when Tua was in this year, Tyreek Hill wasn't this absolute game breaker like he was every week in 2023. Yet you still have him here at pick 14. So explain this to me. Why do you think that people are still going to be in on Tyreek Hill?
To just say it in why say many word when short word you trick?
Yep.
Bounce back and name value.
Sure.
I don't think there's any way people are going to see if people see Tyreek Hill at the end of the second round, beginning of the third round in their fantasy drafts. This doesn't typically happen in redraft where the draft board based on how many, based on ADP of people, but that's what happens at our friends over at Underdog, right? Where if people start reaching on guys, the ADP changes and these guys get pushed up draft boards. I think that's going to happen to Tyreek Hill if he starts in that late second, early third, that people are going to be like, Tyreek Hill's going this late in Miami with Tua, like really? So I think this is one where people are going to, again, expect to bounce back and see the name value and go, yeah, he should be going a lot earlier.
I won't counter. Cameron, is there anything you want to add? I was going to kind of save our thoughts just so people could see how much lower we are on Tyreek Hill than Ty, but I'll let you chime in here if you do want to add anything in response to that.
I think people are going to view him the same way they view Devontae Adams this year.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I think. And I think Devontae Adams is going to go later. I think I'm going to take both of them is kind of what I'm saying. And I'm going to feel a little gross, but I'm going to do it in lots of drafts. So Tyreek, please be good.
Cameron confirmed, not an ageist, unlike you fools out there in the public. Let's move on to pick 15 here.
Certain players.
Yes, there's only certain players. AJ Brown for me, AJ Brown for Cameron. Ty, you have Brian Thomas Jr. here at 15, the realist out of the lot. Look, it feels like a very clean tier break at AJ Brown here, does it not? Because I feel like afterwards it's like throw these guys in any order you want. They all got their pros and cons, but AJ Brown, he's the one in Philadelphia. So we assume going into 2025, depending on how the rest of this postseason goes, depending on how his reading antics shake out this offseason. But you do all agree AJ Brown's a pretty clean tier break here, roughly a clean tier break. You have a one pick later time, but
I'd go one more pick and then I'd say tier break just because.
Okay.
Whoever my next guy is I think ends the tier.
Sure. Okay.
But I do agree. We're right. For you, it would make sense that he would be the tier break. Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Ty?
I would agree because I look at pick 14. You guys had Achane and Jacobs, and I had Tyreek. So you could look at my pick and be like, well, that's a tier break for Ty.
Oh,
sure.
15 feels like the general one because, again, like I had Achane and Jacobs higher. I think AJ Brown and Brian Thomas Jr. as well for me. Now we can start to nitpick these guys and be like, there are more cons, even though there are pros, there are more cons with these guys.
Sure. Well, let's move on to the next pick because we do have a few repeats. We have AJ Brown, Ty. You have AJ Brown at 16. Cameron, this is where you do have Derrick Henry. I am shocked to see how much higher I think people will be on Jonathan Taylor than both of you. Now, I know it wasn't great. The Colts were a disaster this year. I'm not refuting that whatsoever. But even again, week 11 on, back half of the season, Jonathan Taylor, the running back 6 overall, like this is for me just the running back craze. Again, people buying in on that. And I know Ty's already going, yeah, you stupid idiot. You can't just look at that and just assume that's what the public is going to see. Look, again, I think people are going to look back half of the season and say, hey, you know what? It's not going to be that bad. And that was still with Anthony Richardson under center at that point. You both think people are going to be that out on Jonathan Taylor, though?
I think the Anthony Richardson narrative is so loud right now that even though you're going to tell people Anthony Richardson was under center, well, Jonathan Taylor was still playing well at the end of the year, they're going to be, I don't care. I can't trust a running back with a guy who plays like that. Even though we just saw James Cook have 16 touchdowns with Josh Allen, who put up 17, even though we saw Saquon Barkley do what he did with Jalen Hurts, people are going to still be, I just can't trust him with Anthony Richardson. You know, he's going to steal too many touchdowns. He's going to steal too many touches. This team's not going to be good. So I think that's what's going to drive him down because I do agree. I think talent-wise, he deserves to be up here for sure.
Ty, why do you think people are going to be out on Jonathan Taylor? Is it the Anthony Richardson narrative? I'm pulling up an Anthony Richardson number here because I do want to recognize. I mentioned weeks 11 through 18, week 13 on as well. I do want to recognize 25 plus fantasy points the last 3 games of the season. That carries a lot of weight in that ranking. But why do you think people are going to be less optimistic on Jonathan Taylor?
The Anthony Richardson narrative is probably the biggest piece of this, but I also think the fact that Jonathan Taylor in the middle part of the season was the running back 28 in points per game, where we had talks about you can't start Jonathan Taylor. There is a world where you have to put him on your bench, and that stinks for a guy that was a consensus top 5, top 6 running back. Again, the highs are high, like you said, last 3 weeks of the season. But I think all of those things, feeling burned with the Richardson narrative, I think it'll push people out. I think maybe the other way you could explain it too, you could say that people are going to be wanting more exciting offenses than the Colts offense.
Yeah, I mean, and that was you boil it down at the end of the year. It seems like that was just another successful formula. Draft good players on good offenses, and you're going to be just fine. And I do want to acknowledge Anthony Richardson did not play the final 2 weeks of the season in week 17 and 18, which that's when Jonathan Taylor was getting fed, 25, 26 touches per game. I believe he had 30 plus in one of those games as well. So I do want to recognize there is a piece of that where probably Anthony Richardson does make more of a difference, but maybe I think the people are just going to be a little bit too optimistic than what they actually will be. So go ahead. You can make fun of me. You can clown me in the comments for putting Jonathan Taylor this high. Let's move on to pick 17 now. This is where I have Brock Bowers. Cameron, you have Kyren Williams here. And Tyler, you have Drake London. I'll observe, Cameron, that this is Kyren Williams' exact ADP from 2024. He was drafted at pick 17 overall. You see no changes here.
No, I could see him getting moved up based off of a contract. If the money comes in, right? If they go, we're going to pay you. I think he's still a year out though. So somebody want to fact check me on if he's even up for, he might be a year out.
He's got 2 years.
2 years.
Okay.
So I think they could offer him one, probably not this year. But I would assume they continue to use him. I think, but the same questions still exist. How much is Blake Corum going to be involved?
Yes.
What does this offense actually look like? Is he going to get the receiving work? Can we expect the touchdowns again? I think all those are fair questions. I think all those are going to be in play, but back-to-back seasons now finishing 17 plus fantasy points per game. I think people are going to be still in on Kyren.
I stand corrected too. He does have 1 year left on his deal.
Oh, so so if he gets it, we'll see the size of the contract because they could just be like, we're going to let you walk because you're averaging You're averaging 4.1 yards per carry, so it's not like
film
you're doing
stinks.
anything, so
the film isn't that great.
So we'll see. It'll be really interesting what they actually do with Kyren.
Yeah, well, Ty and I have Kyren down a little bit lower here, but Ty, you think Drake London actually gets this big of a push with Michael Penix all the way up to pick 17? I mean, again, this is about where Drake London was going this last year, but you think with Michael Penix, he gets this kind of a push into mid-second round still?
I do. I mean, people were pushing him into the late second with Kirk Cousins, and now with Michael Penix and a offense
early
that
second.
is
early.
Was he early second? I thought that was a best ball.
Early
second.
Best ball, yes. Sleeper.
He was best ball early second. He was still going like mid-second though last year too.
Yeah,
he was between 15. He was between 15 to 20.
Yeah, I Fantasy Pros has a wonderful tool where you can compare all the sites, and Drake London's ADP was severely weighted down by ESPN, who had him in the middle of the third round. So
ESPN was a little wonky last year, but go ahead.
They might always be. That's harsh. That is harsh.
Oh boy, we're never going to get a contract with ESPN now, man. Ty,
cut it, Jackson.
No. Mickey's going to take us out.
Yeah, gosh, it's nice knowing y'all. Again, I think this offense in Atlanta is tailored to really getting the ball to Bijan Robinson, like you had mentioned earlier, and Drake London. We joked around when we talked about Drake London earlier in an episode a couple weeks ago. Darnell Mooney, nice little player. Kyle Pitts,
non-existent.
We'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. I really do think that Drake London, again, with the way that he was utilized in this Falcons offense, where he really did kind of assume the do-it-all wide receiver that did it out of the slot, did it on the outside in contested catches, red zone, all that stuff, right? I think Drake London is going to continue to emerge as as not only the go-to guy, but as a very, very reliable option in fantasy.
Well, Cam, I'll come to you next because you do have Drake London at your pick 18. This is where Ty has Brock Bowers. This is where I have Tyreek Hill. But you think Drake London gets the push here too?
Oh, I think so. I've been thinking about this a lot more. I think he could be higher. Dude is wide receiver 5 this year. 100 catches, 1,271 yards, 9 touchdowns. And we thought Kirk Cousins was a lame duck for half of the season. So I just think you can continue to move him up. And if he is pick 18, which I hope he is, I'm going to be drafting a lot of Drake London. I think he's one of those that people are just going to keep buying in the hype of, we finally saw it. The stats were finally there. Get Michael Penix. And that's the thing too. It was similar to what Brian Thomas did last year. Similar types of stats, about 1,300 yards, 90 plus receptions, but he has continuity with his team, right? Brian Thomas has this whole, everything's changing around him. Whereas Drake London, they're going into the second year. They're kind of keeping it somewhat, obviously Penix changing, but I don't know. I think people are going to continue to be in on Drake London, especially if, like you said last year, this was similar to where his ADP already was.
And you know what? As I'm looking at where I have Drake London, I've done a terrible miscalculation and forgotten to calculate in how much people actually like Michael Penix compared to how much I liked him coming out of the draft. I wasn't anti-Michael Penix necessarily. But nobody should listen to me about my NFL draft opinions because Bo Nix is now all of a sudden one of
the next Mac Jones.
Right. Anyways, we'll keep moving to pick 19 here. This is where you and I both have Kyren Williams, Ty, and Cam. This is where you have Jonathan Taylor. Just to briefly touch on Kyren Williams, for me, I think it is a Blake Corum piece. If you're Sean McVay, you look back at this last year, Kyren Williams gave you the box score numbers, but you also can't be a football mind like Sean McVay and watch Kyren Williams and say, man, that's a bang up running back that I got out there playing football right now. I do think Blake Corum factors in a little bit next year, but I also don't think people will push Kyren Williams down to the point where it's like, well, okay, but I tried that last year. And I faded him and I got burned and Kyren Williams was still good. Anything extra boil in for you, Ty?
No, not really.
Great. We'll keep it moving to pick 20 then. Getting some fresh names in here.
Ooh.
Christian McCaffrey for both Ty and I. And Cameron, you have Josh Allen here. Now, Cameron, I'll start with you. We'll come back to Christian McCaffrey. We'll put Christian McCaffrey on ice for a moment. That sounds terrible considering how injury prone he is. But that was, man, I didn't realize that until it came out of my mouth. But CFC, love you, buddy. That was not meant to be a dig at you. Cameron, is Josh Allen just a second round lock at this point? I feel like, spoiler alert, Ty and I have him 2 picks later. But like at this point, it feels like Josh Allen is just a second round lock from here on out.
Yeah, I don't even like drafting quarterbacks early, and I consider him in the second round. And just
I'm almost shifting my opinion entirely to screw late round quarterback. I want Josh Allen.
Yes,
that's it.
I mean, since 2021, he's averaging 4 more points per game than the quarterback 6 on the season. He's averaging 7 more points per game than the quarterback 12. That kind of positional advantage is just unreal.
Yeah,
and not only is it like, he's on this run where Travis Kelce was on a run, right? Where we were talking about Travis Kelce at the tight end position of it's been 4 or 5 years. Josh Allen's been the same way. It's been since 2020 that this dude has been this consistent, quarterback 1 or quarterback 2 on a season. So there's no doubt about it. Like you talk about Amon-Ra as a safe pick, Josh Allen, maybe the safest pick outside of those top, outside of the first round.
Yeah, I literally know. I seriously wonder if people will take him as high as the 1-2 turn, like they did with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
like this could be even higher, and we're just totally undershooting Josh Allen.
Yeah,
and what we project the public will see him as. Again, Josh Allen's a fascinating one. Let us know down below where you would actually be taking Josh Allen, because oh boy, it actually could be a lot higher than where we have him. CMC, this will be the case study of all case studies this offseason. I want you both to give me a number of how high you think Christian McCaffrey could actually go in drafts this year. Pick 20 is the like uber ultra Puka Nacua burn, right? Where I'm like, I gave Puka the discount because of the injury last year. This is like, oh boy, is the nail in the coffin for CMC, but he's too freaking good to not have in the top 20. That's how I decided this. I couldn't put CMC any lower. But man, I'm afraid the public could push him lower. But I also think the public could just be like, screw it, it's CMC. YOLO. So how high? How high are you willing to go?
I think maybe 16, but I really don't think he goes higher than this. I think people are so scared because the worst part was because of last year, because it was all good until the season started. Yeah, until the game was happening. Then it was like, he's out for 10 weeks. Sorry. Like,
forgot to tell you that part. Forgot to tell you he's out tonight and 10 weeks later.
It's an injury that's going to stick with him. That's why I think people are going to be so scared, because he's going to feel like you're either a genius or you just lit a pick on fire. So I don't see him going much higher than this. I'm going to be honest.
Ty, how high? How high are you willing to go?
16. I don't think he's going to sniff the first round by any means.
No. I think his first round days are over.
I think there's a greater chance that you're going to see him in the middle in the third round than you will in the second round. Which is kind of ironic that like we're talking about him here at pick 20, but
this is
that's
like
how scared people can be.
From 16 to 24 would be middle of the second to middle of the third. So we're shooting the middle here, basically. Golly, I hate to give the same answer 3 times in a row. I think I'm 16 though, too. Yeah. If I look at who I got in the first 15 picks, and I got Jonathan Taylor at pick 16.
That was our tier break.
Right. And I think at CMC at the top of this tier, I don't know if I'd push him ahead of AJ Brown, but it's just going to be so fascinating, man, to see where CMC actually ends up. Cam, you have him at 21 in your projected top 25 picks next year. Ty, you have Garrett Wilson at 21. I've got Joe Mixon at 21. I'm kind of shocked how out people are on Joe Mixon. I'm young enough to remember when we did our rest of season rankings and had Joe Mixon in the B tier for rest of season, and we got absolutely crucified for it.
And we were too high.
Yeah, we were too high.
Yeah. I'm young enough to remember that. So what? We hate Joe Mixon now because of 6 weeks?
Brutal.
When he was getting 25 touches a game and putting up top 3 running back. Look, I put out a poll on Twitter. came back. Majority of people would take Mixon early 3rd round. That blew my mind. So apparently my projection here is wrong. Mixon should not be pick 21. He should be pick 31 instead. That blows my mind. That blows my mind.
So Joe Mixon, the whole year, everyone's holding their breath. When's he going to come back to earth? Because we've seen it throughout of all Cincinnati. He's not an efficient runner. He makes his points off PPR and finding the end zone. And then the fantasy playoffs, week 15 to 18. You want to give a guess where he ranked in points per game?
He's got to be like running back 42 if people are hating him.
Running back 50. 7.1 points per game in weeks 15 to 18.
I feel justified all of a sudden. Yep. I feel vindicated.
Yeah, so
I'm dead wrong. There, I'll look. Go change.
Well, okay. Let me change it. So it should be weeks 15 to 17. He did not play the full week 18. That's my bad. So I'll running back 56. Running back 35, 36. Yep. So 8.2 points per game still. Tied with Jordan Mims from New Orleans. So that should show you where he was at. I think it just burns people so much that they're just like, nah, and they're ageist. Dude's 28, gonna be 29.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
That's exactly it. I'm not gonna push Joe Mixon higher than I've ever drafted him when he's going in to be 28. That's what people are gonna say, and he's gonna
yeah.
Just a fun little stat for you for Joe Mixon, right? Since 2017, when Joe Mixon entered the league, he has the 3rd most carries of active running backs. Yes. Derrick Henry's first with 2,200. Zeke is next with 1,817. Oh. Joe Mixon with 1,816. The next closest is Josh Jacobs with 1,600.
Huh.
So I'm going to be willing to buy an age cliff argument for Joe Mixon more than most other running backs going into next year. I wouldn't be surprised if the public does too.
Bunch of ages, you public people. Garrett Wilson, Ty, you have him here at pick 21. You're still buying 2nd round with no Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, because if they move on from
likely no. Well, okay.
Yeah,
let me rephrase. He might be I don't know, Aaron Glenn. Look,
the Aaron team.
Yes, it's a Team Aaron out there in New York. But the wide speculation is that there's no Aaron Rodgers, no Devontae Adams, which is kind of the counter argument to no Aaron Rodgers. But you do think round 2 is still warranted here?
Yeah, Jameis Winston.
Don't get Jameis out in Jersey, man. He deserves better.
He's just gonna play for every team.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's going to get great. He's going to get the Deontay Johnson
just make him the all-time quarterback for every team in the NFL.
Yes, there you go.
All-time offense. Oh, that would be great. Cameron, are you buying it too? Because at pick 22, you have Garrett Wilson here, where Josh Allen or Tyler and I have Josh Allen.
Yeah, because I don't think him and Devontae Adams are going to be on the same team next year. Whether they get rid of Devontae Adams or they trade Garrett Wilson, I don't think Garrett Wilson will allow them to have him on the same team as Devontae Adams. That's where I think it's at. So I think he's going to go be a wide receiver 1 somewhere. That's why I think he's this high.
I think real quick, sorry, Lucas. I think the other thing is Garrett Wilson's going to get the Chris Olave treatment a little bit, where it's like he's the only guy in a bad offense. Like he has to go high, and
So and again, public opinion, right? Like we'll get to mine. I have Garrett Wilson on my list still, but I think there's a little bit of that lesson learned from Chris Olave thing that I'm kind of buying into with the Garrett Wilson. That you two are like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? But pick 23. This is where I have Drake London. Again, I just don't have the public viewing him in the same way, but I could easily see that changing. Again, there's a lot of different ways in which if I were to go back and calculate in how much people love Michael Penix, this pick would definitely change. Tyler, yeah, this is where you have Jonathan Taylor. Cameron, you got Breece Hall sliding in here. Is this a your guy thing? Just be honest.
No, I mean, I think the fact that he was running back 2 in 2023 still holds a lot of weight.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I think this last year, I don't think people are going to hold against him as much as I think if you watch the film, you probably should, because there was a lot of times where he didn't look like Breece Hall. where he didn't look like he was as explosive making the same cuts. So I just don't think people are going to hold it against him. With Jonathan Taylor, I think last year was in a similar boat of he was in this middle, late second round. The year before he was, a top running back. Then 2 years ago, he was top running back, then got hurt this last year. Wasn't quite as good, or in 2023 and then 2024 ADP. He was kind of in the same area. So that's where I see Breece ending up.
Ty, you don't have Breece sliding in here. You share sentiments here. You got a differing opinion on Breece. You think people are just like kind of done with Breece? Burned me at running back 2 last year. Why bother?
I think so. Yeah, and the other thing is too, like this Jets, no one's going to know what the Jets offense is going to be like, regardless of who the quarterback is going to be. I want to recklessly speculate here. Aaron Glenn, new Jets coach, is coming over from where?
Detroit.
Where you had
not only Teddy Bridgewater.
All right. Teddy Two Gloves. You had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs splitting the backfield. Yeah.
Oh, shut up. He didn't call offense. Don't even give me that crap. Get out of here with that.
I was so ready to fire back. You beat me to it.
He learned. He was learning from one of the best in the biz. That's all. You do have Braylon Allen. Like that, I think
that is true.
People were shocked at how involved Braylon Allen was, that you have to consider it.
Sure. Which, when you say, hey, Braylon Allen played more than we all wanted to this year, there's nothing false about that statement whatsoever. All right, Ty. It's freaking Bucky Irving. Liam Cohen's back in town. This was a condition that you and I wanted for Bucky Irving when we talked about him in our skyrocketing dynasty ranks, was whoever comes in, if Liam Cohen's gone, they better bring in the right system. Don't matter because Liam Cohen's back. I will say we formulated these projections before we got the Liam Cohen news that he's renegotiating to stay in Tampa Bay. I'll say right now, it's just too low, right? People are going to be public perception. Bucky Irving's going to be a top 15 pick next year. That's my public opinion. I think people are going to push Bucky into top 15, a top 15 pick.
And so I will likely have 0 shares of Bucky Irving next year.
You and me both. I will have totally 0 shares of Bucky next year. It'll be too rich for my blood. You got that little nervous look on your face there, Cameron.
Devon Achane was the pick 20 this last season after a fantastic little stretch. I understand there's more injury concerns with him, but I think he kind of falls in the same boat. So I think maybe he's a top 20 pick. That's where I think he falls. That's where I think Bucky.
I think people love Bucky. Oh my gosh, people love Bucky Irving.
I think you love Bucky.
No. Hey, I was his biggest critic coming out of the draft.
Were.
I was wrong. And I was very, very wrong. Oregon Bucky shone through it and proved me wrong. It's just too low. Liam Cohen's back. This is going to be higher. All transparency. This was done before the Liam Cohen shenanigans unfolded this afternoon. So here we are. This should be a different pick. Bucky Irving, I do think he gets pushed as high as top 15 this next year. Last pick to bring it home, fellas. This is where I have Garrett Wilson. Again, I'm kind of thinking like we learned with Chris Olave, elite wide receiver. Extremely talented wide receiver in bad offense doesn't always mean production. And now I know Chris Olave missed time with injury, concussion this year, obviously, but even the year prior, right? We learned our lesson there. James Cook, though, I'm fascinated to see you two have him here, not because I'm like infinitely out on James Cook, but this was such an outlier rushing touchdown season for James Cook. 16 of them. When I looked at that number today, my eyes popped out of my eye sockets because I couldn't believe it was. I didn't realize it was 16.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Compared to only like 4 total in his first 2 years in the league. There has to be screaming regression here, no?
Oh, I think there 100% is, but I don't think the public's going to necessarily take that into account. And I think they're going to go, oh, James Cook, really good. 2 years in a row. We got to take him this high, which I think he could, find a way to return on ADP. I don't think he crashes back to 2 rushing touchdowns.
No.
He's still going to be pretty good. But yeah, I would be worried pretty heavily about touchdown regression. I just don't know if the public sees it that way.
pick 25 would be approximately 1 round earlier than where Cook was going in 2024. So again, the touchdowns being in Buffalo, right? The vibes of Buffalo's offense could surely carry James Cook higher. Yep.
Joe Brady potentially departing as well. That's not confirmed. Obviously, it's like he's interviewing for head coaching jobs, but if he ends up departing Buffalo too, that could potentially play a factor. But again, you're probably right. People look at this year and say, well, James Cook, he did it. What if he even hits 10 this year? Which is like, okay, but that's still a higher number than I would probably anticipate. So there you have it. Our early projections for the top 25 picks in 2025 fantasy football drafts. This is where we love to get your opinion, right? So I'm sure our comments are going to be flooded with your opinions. I'm waiting for all the Bucky Irving ones, like the lower it gets on Bucky Irving. I am waiting for all the people to say, where's Bucky Irving? Look, had literally had the news come out not even 24 hours earlier, we could have made all the adjustments in the world. But the fact that this all happened split second this afternoon, and we're like, well, we got to jump on, record, we got to change up a lot. Anyways, Bucky Irving will be higher, but we're curious to hear your thoughts. So let us know in the comments down below, and make sure you're subscribed as well. Turn on those notifications because we are bringing you fantasy football content still all throughout the off season. You can follow us on our other socials as well. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook, and the good old TikTok back up and running, baby. We love to see it. You can follow our personals as well. I am at Lucas Wenzel on X, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Tyler. We'll be back next week. We got Dynasty buys and sells next week, so make sure you come back around for that. We'll see you all next week. Deuces.
Deuces.